Welcome to the lecture on Favorite PHP Editor. This is basically a lecture which explains you about different types of PHP editor available in the market. So if you have a PHP editor already in mind, or you're basically having some experience with the editors and you have your favorite one, then I highly recommend go with that, because it will give you more flexibility on how to edit the files, how to rename the files, and how to play around with the editor. But there are some favorites that's in the PHP community. I just want to bring you to the notice so that you can start using it if you are new to PHP and you haven't used editor before. So this will be a good guidance for you to see what favorite editors are available in the market. This will also differentiate between the two terms, which is IDE and code editor, and I'll show you the softwares from these two perspectives. Okay, so let's jump into the topic. So the lecture objective, after completing this lecture, you will be able to differentiate between code editor and IDE. You will be able to explain it, what is the difference between code editor and IDE. It's a very common question that people ask, whether you have used a code editor or IDE. If you don't know the difference, then it's very hard to explain that. Then I'll show you some favorite editors that I've picked from the market and which we'll be using as part of our course as well. Okay, so let's jump into the topic now. So let's look at the types of the editor, not the actual editors, but what are the types of it. So there are two types of editor. I have picked two editors. One is called as code editor, one is called as integrated development environment, which is IDE. The code editor is basically a simple notepad kind of application wherein you have to type everything yourself. It doesn't do autocomplete, it doesn't check for syntaxes, it doesn't do actually anything. It's basically a simple notepad where you can start open and start writing. If you don't want too much of help from the editor, then this option works well. But IDE is actually good for learning as well, because IDE actually is an environment which actually compiles all the code on the fly, and it will give you some suggestions as well to see what options are available. So there's basically two parts into it. You get to learn something and your code is compiled then and there, so you know whether whatever you're writing is correct or wrong. Wherein code editors, you don't know that until you compile it, and if you have an error, you have no clue with which line that error is. But if you're using an IDE, even while writing, you already know there's an error, so you can correct it then and there, and then you can save your time compiling and figuring out the errors. So next I'll show you the different types of editors that's available in the market. So first one is Sublime, then the Notepad++. These are called as code editors. So you can choose any of the two. If you don't want to install those heavy softwares and don't want all this autocomplete and code checks and everything, you just want a pretty simple notepad, then choosing any of these two softwares will help you on that. Next is the PHP editor and the NetBeans. These are called as IDE. I'll quickly show you the sites where you can go and download the softwares. So here are the softwares. The first is Sublime Text. If you go to www.sublimetext.com, this is the Sublime editor. You can use it to write the PHP code as well, and is very flexible tool and also very famous in the community. The next is PHP Storm. This is an IDE. This is one of the favorite and one of the famous IDE editor for PHP. If you are using for enterprise purpose, PHP Storm is the IDE. However, it's not free. You have to purchase the license to use it. The next code editor is Notepad++. It is very simple than Sublime, is also very flexible, and also it can do the color coding of your code as well. Then PHP Designer 8, it has HTML, CSS and JavaScript embedded as well, so you can show the syntax checks and you can also see the color coding for your code. Okay, and it has many other features as well. The next is the NetBeans. However, NetBeans is more famous with Java as well, but it does has the PHP support and C and C++ support. So if you are looking at an editor which has Java and PHP and other languages, then you can go to NetBeans and use this software. Okay, so let's summarize the lecture. So by now you should be able to differentiate between code editor and IDE, and make sure you remember this and don't make a mistake of confusing between any of these two words. Next is you will pick your favorite PHP editor. Okay, so let's move on to the next lecture.